I knew something was terribly wrong the moment the glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the kitchen tiles. I wasn't startled, I was steady, awake, fully aware. But seeing the shards glinting on the floor, scattered like icy tears, something inside me whispered, this wasn't an accident. Not tonight. Not after what I'd overheard. The voice still echoed in my ears. Andrew's voice, low, urgent, threaded with a kind of panic I had never heard from him before. I had only caught a piece of the conversation, muffled through the wall while I stood in the dark hallway, my hand resting on the banister to steady myself. She won't even notice. She doesn't check anything. Just do it. Before she figures out. Claire's voice cut in, sharp and impatient, though I couldn't make out her words. But I didn't need to. I had heard enough. I kept replaying that half-sentence in my mind, trying not to crumble beneath the weight of what it might mean. Trying to convince myself there was some innocent explanation, some misunderstanding, some kindness hiding inside that tone of urgency. But deep down, deep where mothers know the truth before the world ever admits it, I felt something tighten in my chest. A warning. A reckoning. A beginning of an end I should have seen coming. That's when the glass fell. And it didn't shatter loudly, it seemed to break slow, as if even the universe wanted me to hear every crack. I knelt to pick up the pieces, careful not to cut myself. My hands trembled despite my resolve. The kitchen was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, an old sound, familiar, loyal, unlike the voices I had heard earlier. The house felt cold tonight, colder than winter winds. A strange cold, the kind that doesn't come from weather but from truth pressing up against your skin. I set the broken pieces aside and inhaled deeply. I had spent years ignoring the small signs, being seated at the far end of the table, being forgotten in conversations, being served cold meals while everyone else enjoyed warmth and laughter. I told myself it didn't matter, that families changed, that I should be grateful for whatever presents they allowed me. But last night's dinner hadn't just been cold, it had been deliberate. I saw the way Claire's eyes slid past me as if I were nothing but a shadow. I saw the way Andrew avoided looking at me, as if meeting my gaze might unravel something he wasn't ready to face. And now their quiet voices behind the closed door. Their urgency. Their plans. Before she figures out. Before I figure out what? The question throbbed inside me as I swept the last shard from under the counter. I straightened up slowly, my knees aching, but my mind sharper than it had been in years. Fear didn't visit women my age often. Loneliness did, invisibility did, exhaustion did. But this night fear had come to sit beside me, familiar and cold. I walked to the living room, turned on only the lamp in the corner and sat in my chair. The house, my little sanctuary, suddenly felt like a place where truth had seeped through the walls unnoticed. Something had shifted. Not in them. In me. For the first time I wasn't looking away. I wasn't excusing anything. I was listening. And I was finally hearing. What exactly were they planning before I figured it out? And why did their voices sound like they weren't just taking advantage of me, but taking something from me entirely? The morning after that overheard whisper in the shattered glass, I felt like I was moving through a dream. Not the soft kind, the kind where shadows follow you even when you turn on all the lights. The kind where your chest feels too tight for your own breath. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that I had misheard, that the words before she figures out could mean anything. Maybe a surprise. Maybe something harmless. But mothers don't mistake fear in their children's voices. And Andrew had sounded afraid. Not for me, but of something involving me. Still, I dressed for dinner at their house as if nothing had happened. Habit maybe. Hope maybe. Or the stubborn belief that if I just kept showing up, eventually someone would turn and really see me again. When I arrived, the house glowed warm from the outside. Golden light spilled from the windows, the kind that promised comfort. But as soon as I stepped in, I felt the difference. An invisible barrier I had grown too familiar with. Claire greeted me with a quick smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Helen, you're early," she said, glancing over my shoulder as if expecting someone more important. "I'm right on time," I replied softly. Andrew walked in a moment later, phone in hand, brows furrowed deep. Too deep for a man supposedly enjoying a family evening. He kissed my cheek, quick and distracted. "Hey, Mom. Dinner's almost ready." But he didn't hold my gaze. Not even for a second. I took my seat at the far end of the long table, the seat they saved for me every time. Technically part of the table, but just barely. A place someone could forget if they looked too quickly. Claire placed a cold plate in front of me. The others were served steaming steaks, pink and glistening. Mine was gray stiff, the edges curled up like it had been sitting out for hours. "Oh, hope the seasoning isn't too strong for you," she said, still not looking at me. Seasoning? The meat was ice cold. "It's fine," I murmured. I had learned years ago that complaining in that house meant becoming the topic of a whispered conversation later. The children ate quickly, laughing when prompted, quiet when Claire's eyes flicked toward them. Michael at least looked at me, really looked. His small smile flickered like a light bulb, unsure whether it had power left. I tried to smile back, but something in my chest pressed down too hard. Something new. Something sharp. As the chatter continued about vacation homes, renovations, upgraded school programs, something sank deeper into my bones. All these luxuries had my fingerprints on them. My retirement money. My sacrifices. My quiet giving. And yet somehow, I was the only person at that table served leftovers. I chewed slowly, swallowing more memories than meat. At one point, the chef slipped in through the back door, carrying dishes from a catering bag. Claire rushed to hide it. "Put that in the kitchen quickly," she whispered harshly. Then she turned to her guests with a bright smile. "I cooked everything myself tonight." No one questioned it. Image mattered more than truth in this house. I finished first, unnoticed. Cold food is easy to swallow when you've been swallowing disrespect for years. Dessert, something glossy and expensive, was served beautifully to everyone. Mine came last. A sliver so thin I could almost see the plate through it. By the time I stood to leave, Andrew barely looked up. "Drive safe, Mom," he said, already reading something on his phone. I always do. Outside, the night air wrapped around me. Cold, but somehow kinder than the warmth inside their dining room. As I reached my car, I paused. In the window, through sheer curtains, I saw Andrew and Claire's silhouettes bent close together. His hand pressed to his forehead, her voice sharp and fast. It wasn't a marital argument. It was a planning whisper, just like the one I'd heard the night before. "Before she figures out." The words echoed again, heavy, dangerous. A family dinner was supposed to feel like home. But that night felt like the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. Something that made my heart twist in warning. Something far bigger than cold steak or cold treatment. Something planned. Were they simply taking advantage of me? Or were they preparing to take something far worse? Something I wasn't supposed to discover until it was too late? That night, after I left their house, I didn't turn on a single light when I returned home. I walked through the dark rooms by memory, my hands sliding along familiar walls, my steps soft on the creaking wooden floor. My house has always been quiet, but tonight, the quiet felt different, like it was waiting for me to finally hear something I had ignored for too long. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had balanced checkbooks for years, where I once braided Andrew's hair when he was small, where I had signed documents I never should have signed, documents that had seemed harmless, temporary, acts of love disguised as responsibility. But tonight, with their voices ringing in my ears, those signatures felt heavy, dangerous. "Before she figures out." Those words followed me like a shadow, whispering their meaning against my skin. My stomach knotted itself in ways I hadn't felt since the day I buried Thomas. I stood slowly, walked to the hallway, and opened the small study door. Dust rose into the air like it had been holding its breath. The filing cabinet sat in the corner. The old metal one Thomas insisted we buy decades ago because he said, "If you don't guard your own life on paper, someone else will rewrite it for you." I hadn't thought about that line in years. But tonight, it felt like a warning from the man I loved. The drawer slid open with a groan. Inside, everything was neat, organized, trustworthy. I had always believed that meant safe. But safety doesn't live in neat papers. Safety lives in truth. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out the thickest folder, the one labeled family. I carried it to the desk and sat down slowly, afraid of the weight inside it. But I opened it, and the truth spilled out like cold water. Bills old and new, insurance payments, mortgage payments, loans, utilities, school fees, credit card statements, all tied to my account, all silently draining me. all lingering in the background like ghosts I refused to acknowledge. I turned each page slowly, each one cutting deeper than the last. The car payment, the second mortgage, the private school tuition, the home renovations, the emergency fund I created for them without ever asking what the emergencies were, the credit card Claire used freely, as if my name existed only to support the life she wanted to live. My signature appeared again and again, tiny tired marks of love that had gone unnoticed, unappreciated, unreturned. Some payments were ones I remembered agreeing to. Many were not. My breath tightened. My heart knocked painfully against my ribs. And then I reached the last sheet. A sheet I had never signed. A sheet I wasn't supposed to see. A new authorization form. A transfer request. A change of ownership. One that would move a significant portion of my investment account entirely into Andrew's name, effective only with a second signature. Mine. And signed. But printed. Prepared. Waiting. They had been planning something. Something big. Something irreversible. Something they feared I might figure out. I stared at the typed lines, my pulse drumming in my fingers. How long had they been preparing this? How long had they been counting on my trust? How long had my silence made me an easy target? My throat thickened with something that wasn't quite sorrow and wasn't quite anger. Something in between, something colder, sharper, the kind of pain that comes when betrayal isn't sudden but built over years of small cuts. I leaned back in the chair. The house creaked softly, as if settling into the truth with me. I did this, I whispered to the empty room. Not in guilt but in recognition. I had handed them everything without asking them to hold anything in return. I had taught them I didn't need respect. Just love. Or what I thought was love. Thomas once told me, "Don't let the people you love forget that you are a person too." I had forgotten that. I had allowed myself to become a source. A well. A quiet provider. And now the well was being drained dry. Not by accident. By planning. My hands steadied. Not from shock. From a clarity so sharp, I could almost feel it cutting away the years of excuses. They weren't just taking advantage of me. They were preparing to take control of everything. Everything. And they thought I wouldn't notice until it was too late. But what exactly did Andrew need so desperately that he was willing to cross this line? And what had pushed him into such quiet panic in the first place? By the time dawn crept through my bedroom curtains, something inside me had shifted. Not snapped, not broken, but settled. Like all the scattered pieces of myself finally decided to lie still long enough for me to see them clearly. I rose slowly, feeling every year in my bones, but my mind felt sharper than it had in decades. The house felt different too. Not lonely. Not heavy. Just honest. I made tea, holding the warm mug between my hands as I stared at the kitchen table where I had spent half the night reading papers I was never meant to see. The unsigned transfer form lay on top of the pile. Quiet, patient, waiting for the signature that would have handed over most of what I owned. Waiting for me to be blind. Waiting for me to trust. Waiting for the woman I used to be. But that woman was gone now. By 8:30 I was standing outside the bank, folder tucked under my arm. A thin morning rain left the sidewalk shining like glass. My coat felt heavier on my shoulders, but it wasn't from the weather. It was from the truth. Inside, the lights were warm, the floors polished, the air filled with the faint hum of printers and whispered conversations. A young man at the reception desk smiled politely. "Good morning. How can I help you?" I returned a small nod. "I'd like to speak with Laura Jennings, please." He typed quickly, then pointed me toward the waiting area. "She'll be free shortly." I sat in a chair near the window, watching the rain drip down the glass. For once I didn't feel rushed. I didn't feel afraid. I didn't even feel angry. I felt ready. Laura appeared a few minutes later, her soft eyes widening when she saw me. "Helen," she said warmly. "Come in. Let's get you settled." Her office was tidy, familiar. A plant wilted slightly in the corner, the same one she forgot to water every visit. That small imperfection always comforted me. It reminded me that people could still be human without falling apart. "What brings you in so early?" she asked gently. I placed the folder on her desk. "I need to make some changes." She skimmed the first few papers, and her eyebrows lifted. These are a lot of automatic payments." "Yes." All tied to other households? Yes. And would you like to stop all of them? I said softly. Something in her face softened. Not pity, something closer to understanding. And the credit cards? She asked. Frozen. All three. And your son's authorization on your accounts? Her voice deepened. Kinder. Revoke it. She hesitated. Helen, are you safe? Is someone pressuring you? My lips curved slightly. Not in humor, but in a quiet, tired kind of irony. The pressure, I said, has lasted 20 years. But I am safe. Safer than I've been in a long time. That was enough for her. For the next 20 minutes we worked through each document. My signature, sharp and steady, filled the pages without a tremor. With each line I signed, I felt my life inching back toward me, like a slow tide returning to shore. When it was done, Laura looked at me with soft pride. You made brave decisions today. Not brave, I said. Just necessary. Outside, the rain had stopped. A thin ray of sunlight pushed through the clouds, warm on my face. I walked to my car without rushing. The world looked the same as yesterday, but something in me wasn't. My phone buzzed as soon as I reached home. First Claire, then Andrew, then Claire again. I didn't answer. I placed the phone face down on the counter and let silence settle around me. At first the messages were confused, then panicked, then angry. I sat at my table and sipped tea while the storm built inside each vibration of the phone. But the calm inside me didn't break. Not even when Andrew's message arrived. Mom, something's wrong. The mortgage bounced. The cards are frozen. The bank said you removed my access. Call me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask if something had happened to me. He asked about the bills, the money, the access, the world he had built with my hands but never acknowledged. I took another slow sip of tea and stared out the window, listening to the rain's soft return. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a burden. I didn't feel like a wallet. I didn't feel small. I felt free. But if freezing the accounts shook them this badly, what was Andrew so desperately trying to prevent me from uncovering? What was he hiding that made him whisper plans in the dark? By afternoon, the silence in my house had thickened into something almost sacred. I moved through the room slowly, touching the back of chairs, straightening a frame on the wall, folding a towel. Small rituals that reminded me that my life still belonged to me. But my phone would not stop buzzing. At first, the messages had been confused. Andrew. Mom, did the bank make a mistake? Call me. Claire. My card was declined. This is humiliating. What is going on? Then they turned panicked. Andrew. The insurance lapsed. The mortgage bounced again. They won't tell me anything without your authorization. Please answer. Claire. The school called. Tuition didn't go through. They want a meeting. This is a disaster. Then the panic became anger. Claire. You can't just shut everything off without warning. This is irresponsible. Andrew. Mom, you're acting irrational. We have responsibilities, you know that. Responsibilities I'd paid for nearly a decade. Then, as if the universe wanted to offer me a moment of breath between storms, the calls went quiet. Just for a minute. And then, the phone buzzed again, but the name on the screen made my heart soften. Michael. I picked up immediately. Grandma. His voice was small, careful, like stepping into a room where something fragile had been dropped. Oh, sweetheart. Are you all right? I asked. He hesitated. Dad's upset. Mom too. Really upset. They're yelling a lot. Dad's saying something about the bank and the cards and you. Guilt tried to rise in me, but I pushed it back. Adults create their own storms, children just get caught in the rain. And how are you feeling? I asked softly. I don't know, he admitted. Just confused. I left for school early. Dad said something about everything falling apart. I closed my eyes. Falling apart usually looks dramatic. Truthfully, it looks like people finally seeing what they stood on wasn't theirs. Michael, I said. I made some changes. Changes that were overdue. He was quiet a moment. Because of last night, he whispered. My breath caught. He had noticed. Of course he had. Children see more in silence than adults see in chaos. Yes, I said. Partly because of last night. But mostly because I've been carrying too much for too long. He exhaled softly, almost relieved. I thought so. he murmured. Grandma, you didn't look like yourself. That line carved something deep into me, a tenderness I had forgotten how to hold. I'm proud of you for noticing, I said. He hesitated again. I don't think they mean to use you, Grandma, but they just got used to it. Honest words from a child forced to grow up watching adults forget gratitude. Thank you for calling me, I told him. It means more than you know. Of course, he said. I love you. I love you too. We hung up, and the house felt less empty for a moment. But that peace didn't last long. A car door slammed outside hard. Footsteps, fast and heavy, made their way up the walkway. I didn't move. I didn't need to. 3 seconds later, my phone buzzed. Claire, we're outside. Open the door. I let the phone go dark. Then came the knocking. Not gentle. Not curious. Sharp. Urgent. Demanding. Helen. Claire's voice cracked through the door. Open this door right now. We need to talk. I sat still in my chair, letting the anger wash past the windows. Then Andrew's voice joined hers. Mom, come on. Open the door. We can fix this. Fix this. Those words spoke more truth than he intended. They weren't here because they cared about me. They were here because their world, the world built on my quiet sacrifices, was collapsing, and they didn't know how to live without the net I had woven under their lives. The knocking lasted another full minute. Then voices arguing. Claire sharp and frantic, Andrew frustrated and defeated. Finally, the sound of the car door slamming again. The engine revved. They drove away. The house grew still once more. I took a deep breath, the first full breath I'd felt in months. But then, a new message buzzed. Not from Andrew. Not from Claire. Unknown number. Helen Grant. This is Detective Harris. We need to speak with you regarding your son. My heart dropped. Not from fear. From realization. Whatever I thought Andrew might be hiding, I had barely scratched the surface. Why would a detective be calling me about my son? And what truth was waiting behind that knock that I had been too blind to see for years? The detective's message sat on my screen like a cold hand pressed to my throat. For hours I didn't move. I didn't call back. I simply sat in my living room, listening to the way the house seemed to shift around me, like it already knew what I didn't. A detective. About my son. It could have been anything, something minor, something simple. A misunderstanding. A clerical error. But mothers know. We don't always admit it aloud, but we know when a storm isn't coming, but has already arrived. And this one had been building for years. I finally dialed the number just after sunset. The sky outside was bruised purple, fading into black. Detective Harris speaking. A steady male voice answered. This is Helen Grant, I said quietly. You asked to speak with me. He inhaled, thoughtful and slow. Mrs. Grant, thank you for calling back. I understand this might be difficult. What is this about? I asked, clutching the arm of my chair. Another pause. It's about your son, Andrew. My heart thudded once, hard and hollow. What happened? Mrs. Grant, has your son spoken to you about his financial situation recently? A strange numbness washed across my skin. No, I said. Not in any honest way. That's what we suspected. The detective spoke carefully, as if choosing each word like a shard of glass that could cut no matter how softly it was placed. Your son has been under investigation for several months. Fraud. Misrepresentation of assets. Illegally shifting funds through accounts that didn't belong to him. My breath caught. I gripped the chair tighter. I don't understand. Andrew wouldn't. But even before the words left my mouth, I knew the truth. He would. He already had. Just never in ways obvious enough to pierce a mother's love. The detective continued. We believe he may have used someone close to him, someone with a stable financial history, to funnel funds and stabilize personal accounts in danger of default. My ears rang. My chest tightened until I couldn't breathe. Me, I whispered. Yes, ma'am, he said gently. Your name appears on multiple linked accounts. Some were set up years ago, some more recent. We're trying to determine how much you knew. I closed my eyes. A wave of shame, not for his actions but for my blindness, crashed through me. I had no idea, I whispered. None. That matches what we've seen, he said. Your patterns are consistent with someone being taken advantage of. A small broken laugh escaped me, not from humor, but from the absurdity of finally hearing aloud what I had silently survived for years. My entire motherhood laid bare, sentence by sentence. Mrs. Grant, he continued gently, your son is not under arrest at this time, but he is desperate, and desperate people make bold choices. A chill crawled up my spine. Is he dangerous? I asked. Not violent, the detective said. But he's afraid. Afraid of losing his home, his career, his standing. Afraid of the investigation closing in. Then his voice lowered. And afraid you might pull the last thread holding his life together. My hands shook. My mind raced. Before she figures out, the whisper I'd overheard wasn't planning a small deceit. It was planning survival. At my expense. Detective, I said quietly, what exactly did Andrew do? There was a long silence. Then, he was preparing to transfer a large portion of your retirement portfolio into his name. He never submitted the final document. But the form was prepared. He wouldn't have needed your signature in person. Just access to your checkbook or your phone. I closed my eyes as a sharp pain pierced behind my ribs. So I had been right all along. The cold plate. The distant dinners. The missing gratitude. The whisper behind the door. The urgency. The panic when I shut everything off. It wasn't just entitlement. It wasn't just dependence. It was fear. Fear of losing the woman whose money had kept his illusions alive. Fear of losing the only account not tied to his failing credit. Fear of being exposed. And fear that I had finally woken up. Mrs. Grant, the detective said softly, I'm telling you this because people in financial distress sometimes manipulate those closest to them. You're not the first mother we've seen in this situation. I pressed a trembling hand to my forehead. What should I do? I whispered. Protect yourself, he said. You've already taken the right steps. And be prepared. He may come to you. Not for reconciliation, but for survival. My eyes filled with tears, not of grief but of recognition. My son, the boy I raised with calloused hands and soft patience, had become someone I no longer knew. Someone capable of taking not just money, but my future. Thank you, I whispered. Call us if anything feels wrong, he said. We'll be watching closely. When the call ended, the house felt impossibly quiet. I sat there for a long time, absorbing each truth like stones laid carefully inside me. Heavy but necessary. My phone buzzed again. Andrew. Mom, please. I need to talk to you. This is urgent. Please answer. Urgent. Not sorry. Not are you okay. Not I need to see you. Just urgent. Urgent for him. Urgent for the life he was losing grip of. Urgent for the mother he had used without seeing. I wiped my cheeks, took a breath that felt like it scraped my lungs raw, and whispered into the quiet. I know what you were trying to do, Andrew, but knowing the truth is one thing. Confronting the son who tried to take everything from me is another. And in part 7, the confrontation finally happens. Andrew showed up the next morning before the sun had fully risen. I heard his car before I saw it. The hurried engine, the sharp turn into my driveway, the door slamming with the force of a man whose world had slipped out from under him. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I didn't hide. I simply stood in my living room, watching the silhouette of my son pacing across my porch, his hands pressed to his head, his steps frantic. Then came the knock. Not angry, not commanding, but desperate. Mom, he called through the door, voice cracking. Please open up. I opened it slowly, and there he was. My boy, but not the boy I raised. This was a man unraveling. Eyes red, jaw tight, face pale beneath the weight of consequences he had run from for too long. Mom, he whispered. I need to talk to you. Please. I stepped aside. He walked in like a man entering a courtroom he never expected to face. The house felt smaller with him inside it, filled with too many memories, too many contradictions. He sank into the chair across from me, the same chair where his father once taught him how to tie a tie, how to look someone in the eye, how to walk like a man with honesty in his spine. I sat down opposite him, hands resting calmly in my lap. He ran both hands through his hair. Mom, everything's falling apart. The mortgage is behind, the school is threatening to remove the kids, The bank froze everything, the credit cards. I lifted a hand gently. Andrew, stop. He swallowed hard. I could see it, the moment he realized I was not the woman he expected to manipulate, soften, or soothe. Something about my eyes stopped him cold. His voice trembled. Mom, I need help. Those words once would have cracked me open. I would have reached for my purse, my keys, my checkbook. But not today. Today I reached for the truth. Andrew, I said softly. A detective called me. The color drained from his face so fast it hurt to watch. No, he whispered. Mom, no. They weren't supposed to. They told me everything, I continued. About the accounts. About the investigation. About how you used my name to keep your life afloat. His breath hitched. Mom, please listen. I've done nothing but listen, I said. My voice was calm, steady, the calm of a woman who had finally stopped lying to herself. I listened when you said you needed help. I listened when you said it was temporary. I listened when you let Claire speak to me like I was an inconvenience in my own family. I listened when you whispered plans behind closed doors. His eyes widened. You heard that? Yes, I said. The night the glass fell. The hook. The moment everything had cracked open. Andrew sank back in his chair, covering his face with both hands. Mom, I didn't mean. I wasn't trying to hurt you. His voice broke. I was drowning. And you decided to pull me under with you. I didn't think. I didn't know what else to do. That, I whispered, is the part that hurts most. He looked at me then, really looked. And in that moment I saw not a villain, not a monster, but a broken, frightened man. A man who had built a life on expectations he couldn't meet. A man who let pride destroy honesty. A man who forgot the mother who once held his world together. I'm sorry, he choked out. Mom, I'm so sorry. I never wanted it to get this far. I closed my eyes, letting the apology reach the part of me that still loved him. Because despite everything, the manipulation, the entitlement, the betrayal, he was still my son. When I reopened my eyes, my voice softened but remained firm. Andrew, forgive you. But forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. And it is not the same as enabling. He nodded slowly, tears slipping down his cheeks. I'm not giving you money, I continued gently. Not anymore. But I'm giving you something better. He looked up confused. A chance to become the man your father hoped you would be. The man I know still exists somewhere inside you. He lowered his head, shoulders shaking. I don't know where to start. Start by telling the truth, I whispered. To the investigators. To your wife. To yourself. He nodded again, broken but listening. We talked for a long time, longer than we had in years. Not about money. Not about accounts. Not about blame. But about mistakes. And second chances. And how love can bend but should never break. When he finally stood to leave, he hugged me tight, trembling, real. Thank you, Mom, he whispered. For what? I asked softly. For not turning your back on me, even when I deserved it. As he drove away, I didn't feel relief or victory. I felt peace. Peace in choosing myself. Peace in setting boundaries. Peace in knowing I could love my son without sacrificing my life to him. And for the first time in years, I felt proud. Of him for facing the truth. And of myself for finally demanding mine. Love should lift, not drain. Help should guide, not enable. And family should never be built on silent sacrifices that cost one person everything. If this story touched your heart, made you think, or opened your eyes, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more real, emotional, powerful stories to life. Thank you for being here.